I found this. I think it's yours.
No, no, it can't be you. I thought I'd lost you forever.
I'm here now.
By the time Mara Ellison reached the cracked marble steps of the Crescent Theater, half the block already knew why she was there. A black town car at noon, 2 board members whispering under one umbrella, 3 reporters pretending to check their phones. The city had spent a week guessing whether the blind CEO of Soundlark would preserve the old theater or gut it and turn it into a gleaming innovation center with her company's name in brushed steel across the front. Mara stood at the curb for a second longer than necessary, cane folded in one hand, rain tapping the roof of the car like impatient fingers. She could smell wet concrete, rust, and the sweet mildew that old buildings wore like a second skin. Somewhere above her, a loosened sign squeaked in the wind. "Ms. Ellison?" one of the board members asked. "Your arm?" "No." Her answer came quickly, clipped, familiar even to herself. "Tell me where the first step is. Don't steer me." A pause. 8 inches forward. She stepped up alone. Inside, the lobby swallowed sound the way churches did. Water dripped from coats, shoes creaked, somebody's bracelet knocked softly against a coffee cup. Mara used the small echoes to place the room in her head. Ticket booth to the left, wide staircase ahead, chandelier somewhere above, unlit for years. The air smelled like dust, velvet, and old paint. Beneath it all, faint as memory, there was a trace of oranges. She nearly hated that. "Careful," a little girl said nearby, voice hushed by instinct. "There's a bucket." Mara halted. A man answered, low and warm. "Poppy, give her a second." Footsteps approached. Not rushed, not pitying, just close enough that she could feel another body in the space. "There's a leak pan by your right foot," the man said, "and the floor slopes a little after that. Want me to walk you around it?" Mara tightened her grip on the cane. She had spent 11 years learning how to hear rooms better than the people standing in them. 11 years teaching investors not to lower their voices when they spoke to her, teaching assistants not to touch her elbow without asking, teaching herself that help was useful only when invited. "No," she said, "I'm fine." The man was quiet for half a heartbeat. "All right, 2 inches left." She moved, clipped the edge of the bucket anyway, and the metal scraped hard across the tile. Someone behind her sucked in a breath. "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than she intended. They hit the lobby and hung there. Then the man, still close enough to hear her without raising his voice, said, "Mara, you never could lie softly." Everything inside her stopped. Not the room. The room kept breathing, rain against the windows, reporters murmuring at the doors, a child shifting her weight in damp sneakers. But Mara herself went still in a way that felt older than blindness. There were voices a body forgot, and voices it stored in the bone. His was still there, not unchanged. Time had roughened the edges, sanded some youth out of it, pressed weariness into the lower notes. But the shape of it, the patient humor, the quiet pull of it, the way her name seemed less spoken than held, came back whole. Her fingers opened. The cane slipped from her hand and hit the floor. She heard herself inhale, small and broken. "Julian?" No one in the lobby moved. "Yes." One word. That was all it took. Mara bent as if the floor had tilted beneath her. She didn't sob. She didn't make a scene. But tears came so suddenly her face ached with them, and for one humiliating, impossible second, she was 26 again, in a dressing room that smelled like grease paint and oranges, listening to the man she loved rehearse lines in the dark. "Mama?" the little girl whispered. Julian said nothing for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful in a way that hurt more than surprise. "I've got you," he said, though he wasn't yet touching her. "Mara, can I pick up your cane?" She nodded because speech had left her. "And can I put my hand under your elbow?" Another nod. Only then did he do it. That was the thing that undid her most, not that he remembered her name or that fate had dragged him into the exact building she was deciding whether to erase, but that after 11 years, Julian still asked. He guided her around the bucket as if the years between them were glass he did not want to crack. The board members recovered first. One of them cleared his throat and launched into apologies about the condition of the property, the delay in the inspection, the caretaker on site. Mara barely heard him. Caretaker. Julian had once been the golden center of any room he entered. Stage actor, voice coach, the kind of man who could make reading a grocery list sound like a confession. Now he was standing in a leaking lobby being called caretaker, with a little girl at his side and rain on his shoes. Mara wiped her face once with the heel of her hand and hated that it changed nothing. "I need," she said, then stopped. "I need a minute." "We can clear the lobby," one board member offered quickly. "No." Her throat felt raw. "Everyone stays. I just—" She turned slightly toward the small quiet she'd tracked near Julian's leg. "What's your name?" "Poppy," the little girl said. "I'm 9. I'm not supposed to tell strangers my last name, unless Dad says it's okay." A tiny laugh escaped Mara before she could stop it. It came out wet and strange. Julian exhaled, and she could hear the smile he probably didn't mean to show. "That's right." "Sorry you almost tripped," Poppy added. "This place leaks when it rains from the west. Dad put 3 buckets down, but Mr. Feld only brought 1 mop, and then he left because he said rich people make him itchy." "Poppy." "What? You said he was rude." Mara laughed again, and this time it hurt less. One of the reporters near the door murmured something about getting a quote. The sound snapped her back into the present. She straightened. It took effort. So did the next sentence. "Boardroom," she said. 10 minutes, without the press." "We don't have a boardroom here," Julian said. "Then find me a room with a door." "The green room's dry." Of course he would know that. He led her down a narrow hallway at the edge of the lobby, Poppy following with the soft, drag-skip rhythm of a child who had been told to behave and was losing the argument. Mara counted doors by echo, trying not to count years. The green room still smelled faintly of powder and hot fabric, though the bulbs around the mirrors had been dead longer than she cared to imagine. Julian closed the door behind them. Rain softened at once. Neither spoke. Mara heard Poppy settle into a chair, heard paper crinkle, candy wrapper or granola bar. Julian stayed near the door, as if unsure whether he was welcome closer. When Mara finally found her voice, it came out steadier than she felt. "You're a father." "Yes." "You work here." "For now." "For now?" "The theater is being sold," Poppy said helpfully. Poppy. "What? She literally came to decide that." Mara almost said, children shouldn't have to know things like that, but that would have been dishonest. She had known too much, too young herself. So had Julian, if memory served. Instead, she asked the question that had been pressing against her ribs from the moment she heard him speak. "Why didn't you say my name out there?" His answer took a second. "Because you said you were fine in the tone people use when they'd rather walk into traffic than be recognized." That was so exactly him she had to close her eyes, though closing them meant nothing now. "I was not expecting—" "Me either." The silence after that held no anger. Not yet. Only caution and the enormous shape of everything unsaid. If you've ever pushed away the person who loved you most because needing them felt too much like drowning, then you already know this wasn't really about a theater. Mara sat, more because her knees had become unreliable than because she wanted to. Did you know I was coming? I knew Soundlark was sending someone. I didn't know it would be you. Did you know I'm blind? A small shift of fabric. He had likely shoved a hand into his pocket, the way he used to when he was picking words carefully. Everybody knows. Of course they did. Interviews, profiles, panels about accessibility. She had turned the worst thing that ever happened to her into a polished origin story people repeated over hors d'oeuvres. The truth had been uglier. It had smelled like disinfectant and fear. Retinal vasculitis, aggressive and strange, devouring her sight in less than a year. Doctors speaking with professional sadness. Her mother insisting on optimism like it was a moral obligation. Julian holding her hand in waiting rooms until one day Mara could no longer bear the shape of his patience, mistook it for pity, and used every sharp thing she had learned from ambitious people to cut him away before he could decide she was too much. She had told herself it was mercy. It had been cowardice with elegant vocabulary. "I'm sorry," she said, and immediately hated how small the words sounded beside 11 years. "For which part?" Julian asked quietly. There it was. Not cruelty, only truth. Poppy rustled again. "Do you guys know each other from before?" "Yes," Julian said. "A long time ago," Mara added. "Were you friends?" Neither answered fast enough. Poppy let out the sigh of a child surrounded by emotionally damaged adults. "So that's a yes." Julian huffed a laugh through his nose. Mara remembered that sound too. She wished memory were kinder. The board could wait. The reporters could wait. Even the theater, somehow, could wait another few minutes. "What happened?" she asked. "After?" He understood the question. After she ended it. After she mailed the ring back inside a plain envelope because hearing his voice on the phone would have broken her resolve. After he knocked on her apartment door and she told the concierge not to let him up. After the world narrowed. "A lot," he said. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's the polite version." Mara bowed her head. "Then give me the impolite one." He took his time. "My audition work dried up first. Not because of you. It was already unstable. I started coaching high school theater, then voice lessons, then corporate narration gigs. I met Lena 3 years later. She was a costume designer, smarter than me, funniest woman I'd ever known." His voice shifted on that sentence, softening into grief with practice around the edges. Not fresh, but never old. "We got married. We had Poppy. Lena got sick when Poppy was 6. Poppy said nothing. The room changed around her silence. She died 2 years ago." Julian finished. Mara gripped the edge of the chair until her knuckles hurt. "I didn't know." "I know." The answer was not accusing. That made it worse. "What about you?" he asked after a while. It was almost funny. He was asking it like they had bumped into each other at a grocery store instead of at the wreckage of a place that belonged to both their memories. "I built Soundlark," she said. "You know that part." "I know the magazine version." "The magazine version is more flattering." "That's usually how magazines work." She almost smiled. "I lost the rest of my sight 3 months after I left you." The air thinned. She had never said it to him, not directly. Not even in the cruel final letter that had insisted he deserved a life not built around hospitals and railings and compromise. "I know," he said. Her head lifted. How? I ran into your mother once, at a fundraiser, a year later. Mara went still. And? She told me you were doing well. She also told me not to contact you because you'd finally accepted what needed accepting. A cold, familiar understanding slid into place. Her mother had always preferred decisiveness over tenderness, pain with posture, loss with clean edges. Mara laughed once without humor. That sounds like her. I didn't know whether to believe her. Did you? I believed you wanted me gone, he said. That was enough. There it was. Not one catastrophic misunderstanding, just several ordinary failures of courage stacked together until they became a life. Poppy slid off her chair. I'm hungry. Bless her. Julian moved immediately. There are crackers in my bag. No peanut butter ones. You liked peanut butter yesterday. Today, I'm against them. Mara heard the bag unzip, the soft, domestic friction of foil and parental patience. She turned her face away, suddenly overwhelmed by the intimacy of surviving people, by the fact that Julian had become someone's routine, someone's safe place. She was glad. She was jealous. She was ashamed of both feelings. Why are you here, really? He asked after Poppy settled. Not the board-approved answer. Mara inhaled. Because the building is underperforming, the neighborhood is changing, and my company needs a downtown public lab for our new audio navigation program. That sounds very polished. It's true. It's also not all of it. No, it wasn't. She reached for honesty and found it waiting, stubborn and humiliating. Because this was the last place I remember seeing your face clearly. The room went perfectly still. When Julian spoke again, his voice was lower. Mara? I came because I told myself it was strategic, but I think, she swallowed. I think I wanted to know whether the place would still sound like us. Poppy, who had been very quiet, asked with devastating simplicity. Did you love my dad? Julian made a helpless noise. Poppy. What? I'm literally in the room. Mara laughed through the ache in her throat. Yes, she said. Very much. Another pause. Do you still? Poppy asked. Children were merciless. That, too, was a kind of honesty. Julian stepped in before Mara could answer. Why don't you go see if Mr. Feld left the flashlight in the wings? He did. Then go prove it. Poppy muttered something about adults being cowards and slipped out. The door clicked shut. Mara sat with the echo. Sorry, Julian said. Don't be. She asks the questions people spend years avoiding. A long breath left him. She gets that from Lena. The name landed gently this time, as it should. Mara had no right to resent a dead woman for being loved. Does she remember her voice? Mara asked. Some days. Some days she says she does, and I can't tell whether she really does or she's protecting me. Mara felt something inside her sharpen with purpose. Soundlark had been born from her fear of forgetting what the world looked like. Somewhere along the way, she had learned that voices disappeared faster. A laugh, a cadence, the exact way someone said your name, those went first. We built a memory archive tool last year, she said, for families. Voice journals, searchable audio, layered with dates and tags. It's still in pilot. Julian was quiet. She could use it, Mara added, if she wants. Is that charity? The question was fair. It also stung. It's an offer. I can't always tell with you. She accepted that hit because she had earned it years ago. Outside, a door banged and someone called for Julian. He didn't answer. "You're angry," Mara said. "Yes." "You should be." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "So why are you still here?" His reply came without drama. "Because once I loved you enough to memorize the sound of your breathing when you were trying not to cry, and out there in the lobby, you sounded exactly the same." That was the moment she nearly broke again. Instead, she stood. "Take me through the theater before the board meeting." He hesitated. "Why?" "Because if I make a decision about this place, I want it to be mine." He opened the door. The tour took 40 minutes. Julian described while Mara listened, mapped, remembered. The lobby, plaster peeling in scrolls. The left aisle seats torn but salvageable. The orchestra pit dry despite the leaks. Dressing rooms cramped, mirrors foxed brown around the edges. Poppy rejoined them with the flashlight she had apparently known the location of all along, and served as commentator, historian, and occasional heckler. "This is where my mom used to pin hems with the pins in her mouth, which Dad said was a terrible example." "It was," Julian said. "She said so were unpaid invoices, and then they both laughed but still fought about money in the parking lot." Julian groaned softly. "Fantastic." Mara hid a smile. On the stage, sound changed. It always had. Even blind, she could feel the room open around her, vast and expectant. Julian stopped beside her. "You used to say every theater has a heartbeat," he said. "I used to say a lot of pretentious things. Some of them were true." She stood in the center mark, rain ticking faintly through the roof somewhere above. In her mind, there was a younger version of herself in the third row, shoes kicked off, watching Julian rehearse Hamlet at midnight because renting a real stage had been impossible, and sneaking in through the side door had felt romantic instead of criminal. "You never made it to New York," she said. "Neither did you." "I built a company." "And I built a life," he said, not defensive, just precise. She nodded. "Yes, you did." Poppy's voice floated from the front row. "I like this room better when people talk nice." Julian laughed helplessly. "That makes one of us." Mara turned toward him. "I'm not buying the theater." He didn't answer. "Not to gut it," she went on. "Not to turn it into another glass box that says innovation while scraping the neighborhood hollow. If Soundlark takes any part of this building, it'll be in partnership. Community ownership, performance space preserved, accessibility upgrades, recording labs open to the public, youth programs protected by contract, not promises." Poppy gasped. "Dad!" Julian said slowly, "The board will hate that. The board hates anything that doesn't fit on one slide." "And you?" Mara looked out at the darkness where the seats were, though looking was no longer the right word. "I'm tired," she said. "Tired of building elegant things that don't know how to keep people." He did not speak for several seconds. Then, softly, "That's new." "No," she said. "That's old. I've just finally learned how to say it." The board meeting was ugly. There was no other word for it. Numbers were cited like scripture. Liability, zoning, capital efficiency, investor confidence. One board member warned that sentimentality was distorting judgment. Another suggested her personal history with the building constituted a conflict of interest. Mara let them finish. Then she told them exactly how much goodwill Soundlark had already spent branding itself as human-centered, while ignoring the human ecosystems that made innovation meaningful. She outlined a partnership model, a phased restoration plan, tax incentives, grant pathways, and a new initiative that would pilot memory archive audio booths for grieving families in underserved neighborhoods. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. By the end, 3 people were angry, 2 were persuaded, and 1 was clever enough to realize the press outside would turn community preservation into better headlines than demolition ever could. The motion passed conditionally. When the room emptied, Mara stayed seated. Julian lingered by the door. "You didn't have to do that because of me." "I know. Or because of what we were." "I know that too." He came a little closer. "Then why does it feel like goodbye?" That question found the one place in her still tender enough to answer honestly. "Because I don't know what I'm allowed to ask for from someone whose life kept going after mine refused to." He took that in. No interruption, no easy mercy. Finally, he said, "You're allowed to ask for coffee." She let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "That's a very modest offer." "It's a very realistic one." "What if I want something less realistic?" "Then you should probably start with coffee anyway." She smiled then. Not because everything had been fixed, not because old love could be reopened like a saved document, but because for the first time in years, the future did not sound like an empty hallway. A week later, Poppy came to Soundlark with her father and recorded 3 things in the memory booth. Her mother laughing after a costume fitting, her father singing badly while making soup, and herself saying, very solemnly, "This is for future me, in case I become dramatic and forget everyone loved me." Mara listened from the control room and laughed so hard she startled an engineer. 2 months later, the Crescent Theater reopened its front doors for the first phase of restoration. Not finished, not polished, alive. There were tactile floor guides in the lobby, hearing loops beneath the seats, community rehearsal space upstairs, and one small studio named Lena Ortiz Recording Room, by unanimous insistence from a 9-year-old with persuasive gifts. Julian ran youth voice workshops 3 nights a week and still fixed things that broke because old habits and poor budgets died hard. Mara came often, usually unannounced, usually after hours, when the building exhaled and the stage remembered them kindly. They did not rush each other. That mattered. Some griefs deserved witnesses, not solutions. Some loves, when they returned, had to learn humility before they could be trusted again. Winter turned, then spring. One night, after a student showcase, Poppy fell asleep in the front row, clutching a program and half a cookie. Julian carried her backstage. Mara waited near the curtain, listening to the murmur of volunteers cleaning up. "She asked me something in the car," Julian said when he returned. Mara tilted her head. "Only one thing? Is she ill?" He laughed softly. "She asked if losing people always hurts this long." Mara felt the air change between them. "What did you tell her?" "That love doesn't really know how to leave cleanly." Silence settled, but it was a gentle one. Then Julian stepped closer. "I have a question too." "All right." "Back in the lobby that day, when you cried, was it because you were embarrassed, or because it was me?" Mara didn't answer immediately. The truth deserved better than speed. "It was because, for a very long time," she said, "I told myself I had survived losing things. My sight, you, the life I thought I'd have. I made surviving sound noble. But hearing your voice again made me realize I hadn't survived all of it." Her hand found the edge of the curtain, rough beneath her fingers. "Some of it, I had only frozen." He was so close now, She could hear the fabric of his sleeve move when he breathed. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "I think I'd rather feel it than be impressive." He made a sound then, small, wrecked, relieved. The kind of sound a person makes when someone finally stops performing strength and tells the truth instead. His hand touched hers. Not dramatic, not possessive, just warm. "Mara." "Yes?" "I can do coffee," he said. "But I should tell you, I'm hoping for something wildly unrealistic." She laughed, and because the building loved old echoes, it came back to them softer and fuller than before. "Good," she said. "So am I." Some stories ended with weddings, or funerals, or the clean arithmetic of justice. Their story did not. It ended, if it ended at all, in the smaller and more difficult place where forgiveness became a daily habit, where grief was allowed a chair at the table, where a child in the front row learned that broken people could still build rooms full of music. Months later, when Poppy introduced Mara to a classmate as "my dad's favorite person who also owns microphones," Julian laughed so hard he nearly dropped a box of cables. And Mara, who had once mistaken refusing help for dignity, who had once believed love became smaller when touched by loss, stood in the middle of the theater she had almost erased and listened to the people she cared for move around her like a living map. The stage creaked. Someone tuned a guitar. Poppy argued passionately about curtain colors. Julian said her name from across the room, and even now, after everything, it still sounded like home.